Welcome to Counterpoint. I'm Tanya Granick-Allen. Whenever I think of foreign spies or undercover agents, I think of James Bond, Carrie Mathison, or Jack Ryan. These characters always seem to be in the thick of it, solving obscure cases while engaging in high-octane action. Great entertainment, right? But there are real people and real intelligence agencies upon which these characters and plot lines are based. Here in Canada, we have spies, or intelligence officers as they are called, who work for CSIS, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. Well, we're in for a treat today, as I have Andrew Kirsch on, a former CSIS intelligence officer, and he's joining me as a guest on today's program. He's going to walk us through the ins and outs of becoming a spy, what happens on the job, and then what happens after you leave the job. All of this is detailed in his book, I Was Never Here, My True Canadian Story of Coffees, Code Names, and Covert Operations in the Age of Terrorism. Welcome, Andrew. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have to say, first of all, congratulations on the book.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So it was an interesting read, and sometimes I felt I was right there with you on your assignments. So what compelled you to write the story?
Well, as you were saying in your intro, I mean, we know a lot about other government agencies from the TV and movies. You know, the British have James Bond, the Americans have Jason Bourne, and the closest we have in Canada, I think, is the '90s RCMP officer in Due South.
Oh, right.
We don't have the tradition of knowing much about our law enforcement intelligence community. So I thought that we could. You know, there's a CIA book written a few a week, and that maybe it was time that we had a book written about CSIS and what it's like to be a Canadian spy or intelligence officer, as we call ourselves here.
So most people don't leave the banking industry and finance industry and to go work for CSIS. What made you want to make that jump from like the private sector to now the public sector and more specifically working for intelligence?
Well, I was working in finance in the UK in London for a bank, and I was there in 2005 when the bombings occurred on July 7th. And that was, you know, I was at university at 9/11, and the bombings happened down in New York. And that was a few states away when I was at University of the US. And now I was down the street when I was living in London. And I thought that, you know, it was time to get involved. There was something happening in the world for those who remember a lot going on. And that's when I kind of joked that I ran away and joined the circus. And there's a real generation of people of my age and vintage. We all did this from many different backgrounds. I was in finance. There were teachers. There were some folks right out of school, lawyers from all different backgrounds, and we all decided we were going to try to find a way to, you know, to get involved in this, the guy called the Age of Terrorism. And I wish there was a cool story about being recruited or somebody, you know, throwing me in the back of an SUV. But really, I went online. I Googled, how do I become a spy, a Canadian spy? And I submitted an application through the online government portal, just like it exists today. And that's what kind of began my journey into being an intelligence officer.
Okay, so let's talk about that. For those who don't want to Google, how do I become a Canadian spy, and don't want that on their search engine history, how does one get recruited, or how do you apply? How does that process work?
It really is. It's a government department, and there is a jobs portal, and they advertise what they're looking for. And at that time, there was a hiring spree to bring in new and more intelligence officers than a lot of us. Now, there are still hiring for intelligence officers and surveillance and a lot of technical. They're looking for a lot of people with technical backgrounds, because that is kind of the future of spying, or the current of spying. And I would encourage everybody who's interested, and I always say to look on the website, see if there's anything interested, and apply, because, you know, my process to get in took about 18 months. You know, it's not a job where you send your CV and cover letter and you get a call in 2 days saying, can you be here on Monday? You know, it is a long process, a lot of steps. And so I say, if you're interested, kind of research it and start it as soon as you can, because you're gonna have a lot of time between your application and you know, hopefully get accepted, to find out if this is a job for you, something you're interested in, or, you know, maybe not.
So 18 months process from the moment you submitted your application till you started training. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so you must have been really invested to want to do this, because you left what I assume was a very comfortable paying job in finance, and now all of a sudden you're in London, and now you're here in Toronto, waiting for 18 months through various steps, I suppose, and you're going to talk about that to learn if you'd made the cut. So we're going to do a deeper dive into what those steps are after we return from this commercial break. Please stick around.